What kind of movie gets banned by governments yet quietly survives on YouTube and Netflix today? The answer is not simple horror. These are films accused of corrupting society, destroying morality, humiliating religion, and pushing violence beyond human comfort. Politicians demanded censorship. Critics walked out in disgust. Entire countries outlawed them. Yet somehow these forbidden French movies escaped the fire and returned online, where millions can now watch them freely late at night with one click. Number 15. The Rules of the Game, 1939. Before French horror became infamous for blood and psychological cruelty, there was a different kind of banned movie. One that terrified people without showing a single murder. The Rules of the Game destroyed audiences because it exposed the hypocrisy of the French upper class during the final days before World War II. Wealthy aristocrats flirted, betrayed each other, and laughed while Europe moved toward disaster. French officials believed the film insulted the nation during a fragile political moment. The backlash became so intense, the government banned it from theaters. What makes the controversy fascinating is how ordinary the film appears today. There are no monsters, no torture scenes, no graphic violence. Yet audiences in 1939 reacted like they had witnessed an attack on France itself. Director Jean Renoir reportedly received threats because many viewers believed he hated his own country. Some critics even blamed the movie for damaging public morale before the war. Decades later, the same film became one of the most respected movies ever made. Modern filmmakers worship it. Film schools analyze every scene. The movie that once outraged France now sits beside cinematic masterpieces. Even stranger is the fact that younger viewers can now stream it online with almost no idea that it was once treated like dangerous propaganda. That transformation from national scandal to streaming classic says everything about how censorship changes over time. Number 14. La Religieuse, 1966. One movie managed to trigger politicians, religious leaders, and angry protesters all at the same time. La Religieuse walked directly into controversy because it portrayed religious institutions as cruel, emotionally abusive, and deeply corrupt. The story followed a young woman forced into convent life against her will, where humiliation, punishment, and psychological torment slowly destroyed her spirit. Catholic organizations exploded with outrage before many people had even seen the film. Demonstrations erupted across France. Political leaders demanded restrictions. The government eventually banned the movie after pressure from religious groups became impossible to ignore. That decision only made the situation worse because the ban transformed the film into forbidden cultural material overnight. Audiences suddenly wanted to see what terrified authorities so much. Critics defended the movie as artistic freedom, while conservative voices claimed it attacked faith itself. The argument became larger than cinema. It evolved into a public battle over censorship morality and the role religion should play in modern society. What still shocks viewers today is how restrained the film feels compared to modern horror or exploitation cinema. There are no chainsaws or graphic murders. The discomfort comes from emotional cruelty and spiritual imprisonment. That quiet suffering disturbed officials more than violence ever could. Today, the same movie that once triggered national panic can be found online by anyone curious enough to search for it. One click replaces what was once treated like forbidden material hidden from the public eye. Number 13. I Stand Alone, 1998. Some movies try to entertain audiences. I Stand Alone feels like it wants to attack them instead. Gaspar Noé created a film so bitter and emotionally toxic that many viewers felt physically uncomfortable sitting through it. The story follows a butcher spiraling through rage, loneliness, hatred, and disturbing fantasies while society collapses around him. Nothing about the experience feels safe. The camera traps audiences inside the mind of a deeply unstable man whose thoughts become more violent with every scene. Instead of offering relief, the film grows darker and uglier until viewers begin questioning why they are still watching. That psychological pressure became the reason many countries restricted or censored the movie. Critics argued endlessly about whether the film was genius or exploitation. Some praised Noé for forcing audiences into uncomfortable emotional territory, Others believed the movie crossed ethical boundaries by immersing viewers in misogyny, violence, and despair for nearly its entire runtime. One detail made the controversy even stronger. The film repeatedly warns audiences they still have time to leave before the ending begins. That warning became legendary because it almost feels like the director challenging viewers directly. Stay if you dare. Walk away if you cannot handle what comes next. Streaming culture strangely revived the movie years later. Younger audiences discovered it online and reacted with the same shock older critics experienced in theaters. Even today, I Stand Alone feels less like entertainment and more like surviving an emotional breakdown captured on camera. Number 12. Inside, 2007. Pregnancy became pure nightmare inside this movie. Inside arrived during the rise of new French extremity cinema and immediately earned a terrifying reputation because of its relentless brutality. The story sounds simple at first. A pregnant woman isolated in her home becomes trapped with a mysterious intruder. Then, the violence begins and never truly stops. Most horror movies pause between shocking moments. Inside refuses to breathe. Every scene escalates the panic further until viewers feel trapped in the house alongside the characters. The gore became so graphic, many countries demanded cuts before allowing release. Some territories refused to screen the unedited version entirely. What separates the movie from ordinary slasher films is its cruelty. Violence here does not feel exciting or playful. It feels intimate, desperate, and painfully human. Audiences expecting traditional horror discovered something far more disturbing. Pregnant women reportedly walked out of screenings unable to finish the film. French horror during the 2000s became infamous worldwide for pushing physical violence beyond Hollywood limits. Yet even among those films Inside stood apart because of how viciously personal it felt. Critics called it unbearable. Horror fans called it a masterpiece. Censors called it unacceptable. Years later, streaming services and online uploads introduced the movie to an entirely new audience. Many viewers clicked play expecting another hidden horror gem and instead discovered one of the harshest survival films ever made. Few movies create genuine anxiety today. Inside still does it with terrifying ease. Number 11. Martyrs, 2008. Few movies have damaged audiences emotionally the way Martyrs did. Viewers entered theaters expecting another violent horror film and walked out shaken, disturbed, and sometimes furious. The movie begins like a revenge thriller before transforming into something far darker and psychologically devastating. French authorities nearly refused certification because the violence was considered too extreme even by horror standards. Several countries either banned the movie outright or demanded severe cuts before release. Critics argued for years over whether the film was profound art or pure cruelty disguised as philosophy. The real reason the movie became infamous was not simply bloodshed, it was hopelessness. Every scene pushes characters deeper into suffering until the audience begins feeling emotionally trapped alongside them. Instead of relief, the movie offers despair. Instead of heroism, it delivers emotional destruction. Some viewers called it life-changing, others called it unbearable. Horror fans still debate whether Martyrs crossed a line that cinema should never approach. That argument never truly disappeared because the film attacks the audience psychologically rather than relying only on visual shock. Streaming platforms unexpectedly revived the controversy years later. Younger viewers discovered the movie through Netflix searches and online discussions where reactions became almost identical to the original theatrical release. People still warn friends before recommending it. Some refuse to ever watch it again. Very few horror movies survive beyond temporary hype. Martyrs became something much stranger, a forbidden modern legend whispered about by audiences who cannot decide whether they admire it or regret seeing it at all. Number 10. Irreversible, 2002. Chaos arrives immediately inside Irreversible. The camera spins violently through dark hallways, crowded nightclubs, and endless screaming while the audience struggles to understand what is happening. Gaspar Noé designed the film like a psychological assault, where confusion becomes part of the horror itself. Then came the controversy that exploded across international cinema. Cannes audiences reportedly walked out in massive numbers during the premiere. Some viewers became physically ill. Others accused the movie of crossing moral boundaries that mainstream cinema should never touch. Newspapers described screenings like public scandals instead of film events. One creative decision made the experience even more disturbing. The story unfolds backward. Audiences first witness rage, revenge, and destruction before slowly discovering the emotional tragedy underneath everything. That reverse structure traps viewers in dread because each scene reveals how inevitable the disaster truly was. Unlike ordinary thrillers, Irreversible offers no comforting distance from suffering. The violence feels ugly, chaotic, and horrifyingly realistic. Critics divided into two completely different camps. One side praised the film as fearless artistic experimentation. The other side condemned it as emotional punishment disguised as cinema. Years later, the movie remains infamous online, where reactions continue exactly as they did during release. Some viewers call it a masterpiece. Others shut it off before finishing. Few movies generate such extreme emotional division even decades later. The strangest part is how available it became. A film once treated like toxic material now appears on streaming platforms and digital rental pages where curious audiences discover firsthand why it created international outrage. Number 9. Fat Girl, 2001. At first glance, Fat Girl looks almost quiet compared to violent French horror films from the same era. There are no masked killers chasing victims through dark hallways, no supernatural creatures hiding in shadows. What disturbed audiences, instead, was how brutally honest the movie felt about adolescence, insecurity, manipulation, and emotional cruelty. Director Catherine Breillat refused to soften the uncomfortable reality of growing up. The film follows two sisters during a vacation where jealousy, loneliness, and emotional confusion slowly build beneath ordinary conversations. Viewers expecting a simple coming-of-age drama discovered something colder, far more unsettling, and emotionally raw. When the movie premiered, critics immediately split apart. Some praised Breillat for confronting difficult realities most filmmakers avoided. Others accused the film of pushing audiences into deeply uncomfortable territory without warning. Several countries restricted or censored the release because of the controversial subject matter and shocking final sequence. That ending became legendary almost overnight. Audiences who sat through the slower emotional build suddenly found themselves staring at one of the most abrupt and disturbing conclusions in French cinema history. Many viewers never forgot it. Some openly hated the movie because of it. What makes Fat Girl fascinating today is how realistic it still feels. The discomfort comes from emotional truth rather than spectacle. There are no fantasy villains here. The danger feels painfully human and recognizable, which arguably makes the experience more disturbing than traditional horror. Streaming and online discussion forums introduced the movie to younger audiences years later, where reactions remained just as divided, proving the controversy surrounding Fat Girl never truly disappeared.
Number 8. Baise-moi, 2002.
French authorities were not prepared for the explosion surrounding Baise-moi. The film arrived like a cultural grenade, detonating across television debates, newspapers, and political discussions almost instantly. Even people who never watched it had strong opinions about it. The story follows two women descending into chaos, violence, and emotional collapse, while moving through a society portrayed as cruel, hostile, and deeply broken. What truly shocked authorities was not simply the brutality, but the aggressive, confrontational tone of the film itself. It felt angry, reckless, and intentionally designed to provoke outrage. French courts eventually revoked the movie's certification after release, which almost never happens for mainstream theatrical films. Some countries banned it entirely, while others demanded severe edits before allowing screenings. Politicians publicly condemned the movie, while defenders argued censorship proved the film's point about social hypocrisy. Viewers walked into theaters expecting controversy and still left stunned. The camera never tries to soften the ugliness unfolding on screen. Instead, it forces audiences to sit with emotional destruction and violent consequences without offering comfort or moral reassurance. Critics remain divided decades later. Some consider the film groundbreaking because it challenged traditional portrayals of women in exploitation cinema. Others believe the movie crossed lines that should never have been crossed. That argument still follows the film everywhere it is mentioned. Now, the same movie that once triggered legal battles can be found through online searches and streaming discussions, where modern viewers continue discovering why governments reacted with panic when it first appeared. Few films ever carried the reputation of being genuinely dangerous. Baise-moi earned that reputation permanently. Number 7. Them. 2006. Silence becomes terrifying inside them. Unlike loud Hollywood horror films packed with explosions and constant music, this French thriller builds fear through isolation, strange noises, and the feeling that somebody might already be inside the house watching from the darkness. The story follows a couple living quietly in a remote home when bizarre disturbances begin late at night. At first, the events seem harmless. Then, the nightmare slowly tightens around them. Doors open unexpectedly. Lights disappear. Footsteps echo through empty rooms. The movie turns ordinary silence into psychological torture. What made the film controversial was how believable it felt. Reports claimed the story was inspired by real events, which intensified audience panic during release. Several countries pushed censorship restrictions because of the film's relentless tension and brutal realism. Critics described it as emotionally exhausting because the terror never truly pauses. Unlike supernatural horror, Them removes all fantasy protection. There are no ghosts or monsters here. Every threat feels possible. That realism disturbed viewers far more deeply than traditional slasher films filled with exaggerated violence. Audiences reportedly left screenings feeling paranoid about returning home alone at night. The movie also helped launch the global fascination with French extreme horror during the 2000s. Hollywood studios soon copied its atmosphere, desperate pacing, and stripped-down survival style. Yet many fans still argue the original remains far more unsettling because of its simplicity. Streaming services introduced Them to a new generation. Years later, where audiences once again reacted with anxiety shock and sleepless nights. Some horror movies rely on jump scares. Them relies on fear, creeping slowly into your mind and refusing to leave. Number 6. Cuties, 2020. No recent French film created global outrage faster than Cuties. Before millions of people even watched the movie, social media exploded into chaos. Politicians condemned it. Online campaigns demanded bans. Streaming subscriptions were canceled in protest. The controversy became international within days. Director Maimouna Doucouré insisted the movie was intended as criticism of modern culture and the pressure placed on young girls by social media, fame, online attention, and adult expectations. But many viewers believed the presentation crossed uncomfortable boundaries even while attempting to criticize them. That debate turned the film into one of the most divisive releases of the decade. Several countries investigated complaints connected to the movie, while public outrage intensified across television news, political commentary, and online discussions. Netflix faced enormous backlash after promotional material triggered accusations that the company had marketed the film irresponsibly. The argument quickly grew larger than the movie itself. What makes the situation unusual is how differently audiences interpreted the same scenes. Some critics praised the film as an important warning about childhood exploitation in digital culture. Others considered it deeply inappropriate regardless of intention. Few movies in recent history divided public opinion so aggressively. Despite the controversy, the film remained available on Netflix, where curious viewers continued watching simply to understand why the outrage became so enormous. That availability kept the debate alive far longer than most scandals survive online. Years later, Cuties still sparks arguments, instantly proving certain films become cultural battlegrounds rather than ordinary entertainment. Very few modern movies triggered worldwide controversy with such explosive speed. Number 5. Trouble Every Day, 2001. Audiences expecting a traditional horror movie were completely unprepared for Trouble Every Day. Director Claire Denis created something far stranger than ordinary terror. The film moves like a dream, poisoned by obsession, loneliness, and uncontrollable hunger, where violence erupts suddenly with shocking intensity. The controversy surrounding the movie began almost immediately after its Cannes premiere. Viewers walked out confused, disturbed, and emotionally drained. Critics could not even agree on what genre the film belonged to. Some called it psychological horror. Others described it as disturbing art cinema disguised as a nightmare. What truly unsettled audiences was the atmosphere. Every frame feels sickly intimate and emotionally suffocating. Instead of relying on loud scares, the film slowly drags viewers into a world where desire becomes destructive and human connection turns dangerous. The violence arrives without warning and feels horrifyingly personal. Many countries restricted the movie because of its graphic imagery and disturbing emotional tone. Mainstream audiences rejected it during release, while underground horror fans slowly transformed it into a cult obsession over the following years. Younger viewers discovering the film online today often react exactly the same way older audiences did 2 decades earlier. Fascination mixed with discomfort. Claire Denis refused to explain everything clearly, which made the experience even more haunting. Questions remain unanswered. Motivations stay mysterious. Characters drift through the story, almost like ghosts consumed by impulses they cannot control. Streaming culture eventually gave the movie a second life, where horror communities began calling it one of the most underrated French nightmares ever created. Some viewers admire its hypnotic artistry. Others find it emotionally unbearable. Either way, nobody forgets trouble every day after watching it once. Number 4. Sal, or the 120 Days of Sodom, 1975. Very few films in history carry the reputation of Salo. Even decades after release, people still speak about it carefully, almost nervously, as though mentioning the title alone feels dangerous. Director Pier Paolo Pasolini created a movie so disturbing, so politically vicious, and emotionally merciless that governments across the world immediately moved to ban it. The story places viewers inside a nightmare controlled by powerful men who reduce human beings into objects for humiliation, cruelty, and psychological destruction. Nothing about the experience feels entertaining. Watching the film feels more like enduring punishment than consuming art. That was exactly why authorities reacted with panic. Many countries outlawed the movie completely. Others seized prints or demanded major cuts before allowing limited screenings. Critics condemned it as depraved and unwatchable, while defenders argued it was a brutal political statement about fascism power and moral collapse. The arguments surrounding Salo became almost as infamous as the movie itself. Adding even more darkness to its legacy was the murder of Pasolini shortly before the film's release. Rumors, conspiracies, and political theories exploded afterward, making the movie feel even more cursed and forbidden in public imagination. Modern viewers discovering Salo online are often shocked that such a film exists at all. Even experienced horror fans struggle with it because the discomfort comes from psychological cruelty rather than simple gore. Many people stop watching before it ends. Yet despite decades of bans, outrage, and censorship, the movie survived. Today, it remains one of the most controversial films ever discussed online, where audiences continue debating whether it represents artistic courage or a boundary cinema should never cross. Number 3. Possession, 1981. No movie captures emotional collapse quite like Possession. The film begins as a relationship drama between a husband and wife trapped inside a crumbling marriage. Then reality slowly mutates into screaming paranoia, hallucinations, and psychological horror so intense that audiences still struggle to explain what they actually watched. When the movie appeared during the early 1980s, many critics completely rejected it. Some called it hysterical. Others described it as emotionally deranged and impossible to follow. British authorities eventually labeled it one of the infamous video nasties, leading to censorship panic and restricted distribution throughout the United Kingdom. The performance by Isabelle Adjani became legendary almost immediately. Her subway tunnel breakdown scene remains one of the most disturbing moments in horror history because it feels terrifyingly real. Viewers were not watching ordinary acting anymore. It looked like a genuine emotional disintegration captured on camera. What separated Possession from mainstream horror was its atmosphere of instability. Nothing feels safe. Characters scream without warning. Conversations collapse into violence. The camera moves wildly through cramped apartments and dark city streets, while reality itself appears to rot away scene by scene. For years, the movie survived mainly through underground horror communities passing around damaged tapes and whispered recommendations. Many people believed it was impossible to find legally because distribution problems kept it hidden from mainstream audiences for decades. Streaming platforms and restored releases finally introduced the film to younger viewers who reacted with exactly the same confusion and fascination audiences experienced in 1981. Some call it one of the greatest horror films ever made. Others think it feels like a nightmare nobody should revisit. Very few banned movies age this well. Possession somehow became even more unsettling with time. Number 2. In the Realm of the Senses, 1976. Authorities across the world reacted to In the Realm of the Senses with immediate alarm. Customs agents seized prints. Governments banned screenings. Court cases followed the film for years. Even discussing the movie publicly created controversy because many officials believed it crossed boundaries cinema should never approach. Director Nagisa Oshima based the story on a real scandalous crime from 1930s Japan involving obsession, jealousy, and emotional dependency spiraling into tragedy. Instead of presenting the story cautiously, Oshima removed nearly every protective barrier audiences expected from mainstream filmmaking. The result shocked international censors beyond belief. Several countries outlawed the movie entirely, while others demanded heavy editing before allowing release. In Japan, authorities even prosecuted people connected to distribution. Yet controversy only increased audience curiosity. The more governments attempted suppression, the more legendary the film became among underground cinema fans worldwide. Unlike exploitation horror built around jump scares or monsters, this movie disturbed viewers through emotional intensity and psychological fixation. The relationship between the characters becomes increasingly consuming until the outside world almost disappears completely. That claustrophobic atmosphere unsettled audiences far more deeply than ordinary thrillers. Film critics remain divided even today. Some consider it an artistic masterpiece, exploring obsession and emotional isolation. Others argue the movie intentionally pushed public boundaries simply to provoke outrage and scandal. That debate has lasted nearly 50 years without ending. Streaming culture eventually revived interest in the film, where younger audiences discovered firsthand why governments once treated it like forbidden material. Very few movies survive decades of censorship and still retain the power to shock modern viewers. In the Realm of the Senses absolutely does. Number 1. A Serbian film, 2010. No movie on this list carries a darker reputation than a Serbian film. Governments banned it. Festivals rejected it. Critics argued over whether it should even exist. The outrage surrounding the movie became so massive that many people heard terrifying stories about it long before ever seeing a single scene. Although not produced in France, the film became heavily associated with the same underground extreme cinema audience that embraced controversial French horror during the 2000s. Fans of banned European films passed the movie through online forums, whispered recommendations, and hidden streaming links, where its reputation only grew more disturbing over time. The story follows a retired performer pulled into a mysterious project that quickly descends into psychological nightmare and horrifying violence. What truly shocked authorities was not only the brutality, but the hopeless atmosphere surrounding every moment. The film feels designed to emotionally destroy viewers rather than entertain them. Countries across Europe banned or censored the movie almost immediately. Some governments declared it morally dangerous. Others demanded major edits before any screening could happen legally. Even experienced horror fans struggled to finish it because the emotional ugliness becomes overwhelming as the story spirals toward complete darkness. Yet, controversy transformed the film into a forbidden legend online. Curious viewers searched for it simply because everyone claimed it was impossible to watch. That notoriety turned the movie into one of the most infamous underground horror titles of modern cinema history. Even today, reactions remain extreme. Some viewers call it meaningless shock material. Others believe it represents rage against corruption, censorship, and societal collapse. Either way, almost nobody forgets watching it. These movies were banned, censored, attacked, and condemned by governments, critics, and audiences around the world. Yet time changed everything. The same films once treated like dangerous material now survive on YouTube, Netflix, and streaming platforms where millions can finally judge them for themselves. The real question is simple. Which one are you brave enough to watch tonight?